Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Alan. I'm here today is a good day for a good day cup because it's Good Friday, and I hope everybody that's out there celebrating Easter holiday has an enjoyable holiday and a safe one. And I want you to remember, sign up for enjoylifesafely.com. That newsletter will still go out this weekend, even though it's a holiday, with information to help you stay safe, enjoy life, and be exceptional. And today, going to really have some good information to help you enjoy your travel and stay safe while you're doing it. Because we have the author of Choose Adventure, Greg Ellifritz, with us today. And I am excited to hear some of his adventures and tips on staying safe, because this book is full of them. It's one of the best travel books that I have on the shelf. And as you know, I have a huge library. This is a great book for traveling around the world and staying safe. And Greg's here to tell us live about some of that. And Greg, in case there's somebody out there that doesn't know your background, if you want to take a couple minutes and, bring us up to speed on your background and what brought you to writing Choose Adventure.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Alan. I'm Greg Ellifritz. I guess I started off with this stuff as a police officer. I retired police officer. I did 25 years as a police officer in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. Uh, Got really into training very, very early. Was chosen to be the full-time training officer for my police department. My agency sent me to whatever kind of training I ever wanted to go to. So I amassed about 4,500 hours of instructor certifications over the course of my career, and ended up teaching full time in a law enforcement capacity. Interestingly enough, about that same time, I started getting into third world adventure travel, and I kind of decided in my retirement to merge the two with the travel book, merging the safety stuff that I learned from the police department and my teaching with all my travel adventures, and kind of creating a niche product of safety and adventure at the same time.
And how many countries have you visited?
It's hard to say, if if you look at all the territories and everything else, it's somewhere a little over 60. I think if you use the strict country definitions, it's probably a little over 50. But some of these countries that I go to, these crazy places, they change pretty regularly, and some aren't in existence anymore. And some places. Are clearly very different than others that might be delineated separately as a country, but are just another territory. So it's kind of hard to say. Somewhere between 50 and 60 would be a good bet.
Right. And out of all of those, what would probably be your favorite that
Man,
you
it's
had
hard.
visited? Your most memorable or favorite place that you visited?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's favorite for what kind of stuff? Is it favorite for outdoor adventure? Is it favorite for cultural stuff? Is it favorite for, just the best experiences I've had? Um, Really hard to say. I've been to a lot of fun places, but I really tend to be drawn back to Latin America. I speak passable Spanish, and that makes it a little bit easier for me to get around down there. Um, Someplace in South or Central America, I usually spend maybe a month to 2 months a year down that area. If I could narrow down to one country, probably be Brazil. I've been there 7 times now. I really like the culture. I like the vibe of the people, the fun adventure. Yeah, I keep going back to Rio for some reason. So I guess that would probably be the favorite.
Right. And I get that because I travel quite a bit, and there's always something unique in wherever you go, and so there's always something good
Yeah.
and unique, and so it's hard to uh, place. Want to say good morning to Jay and Vicky. They're here and said good morning. You mentioned favorite for what? So I remember there's a picture in the book of you eating a big beetle or bug.
Yes.
I, I've
Yes.
I've ate beetles before, and one of the most unique things that people look at me funny is I ate raw horse
Uh huh.
in Japan.
Uh-huh.
more than once. Because
Yes,
and
it's
I
pretty
even
good.
yeah, and I told my friends when we were doing, I said, "Oh, I've had this before. You got to have some, or you won't have a story later."
There you go, there you go. I
What's
like the stories.
what are a couple of the most unique things that you've
Oh,
eaten in
that's
places?
an interesting question. I've had the raw horse. I had raw, aged horse in Iceland, and I was not a big fan of Icelandic food. They seem to have this obsession with black licorice there. All their candy is flavored with black licorice and all kinds of strange fermented foods. But the raw horse was actually pretty good. Other than that, I think Vietnam and Cambodia tended to have the craziest kind of foods. I had scorpion there and ate tarantulas. Actually, went to a roadside market and the young girls in Cambodia. They're tasked with catching the tarantulas. So I paid these young girls' mother a little bit of money and had them take me out tarantula hunting, and they catch the tarantulas and then they use scissors to snip off their fangs so that they're in essence venomless, and they keep them alive until you go to eat them. The bodies were not very good. The legs were okay. They fry them in oil. So yeah, all kinds of various bugs, snakes, but yeah, probably the tarantula and the scorpions in Cambodia were probably the most unique.
That would be it. I remember in Vietnam, one of my more unique things is I'm on the back of this guy's motorcycle that he's taking me to the bus station in Ho Chi Minh, and you know that traffic.
Oh
You're
yes,
getting
it's
bumped by
crazy.
things.
Yes.
We're stopped in this big giant crowd, and I look right beside me, and there's a chicken basket wire filled with all sorts of snakes that guy
Oh
going to the
wow.
snake market. And I'm looking at that, going, some of those might
Oh,
get through that chicken
y-
wire.
that's nuts.
Yeah, so definitely sort of crazy stuff over there. Dixon said, "Howdy, Greg. You too,
Hey,
Alan." So thanks, Dixon, for being here. So yeah, that's and when I first ate raw horse, buddy, my supervisor at Japan took me to dinner. And when it came, he said horse, okay. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then it came, I'm like, raw.
that's
He's
a
like, rare.
tartar. Yeah.
He's like, rare. I said, rare, little cook, raw, no cook. And he's like, no cook. Those are yeah,
Ah.
so
It's interesting that that was so good. At the time, I was dating a veterinarian, and we had traveled to Iceland together, and she was at owned a horse and was absolutely freaked out at the time, but she decided to try it just to say she did, and even she really enjoyed the raw horse meat. She wouldn't admit it, but she liked it.
yeah, it's not bad. And like after having had it with my supervisor, that I was working for at the school, we went to a supermarket, me and a couple American friends that were also teachers in different schools, and they had the samples like they do at
Yeah,
supermarkets here, and they had raw horse samples one day. And they're my couple friends are like, "No way." I'm like, "No, you gotta try some.
right.
You won't have a
Yes.
story when you get
You
home."
gotta have a story. You know, I was reading a book just a few weeks ago, and it just kind of had this throwaway quote, but I really liked it. It said, if you were going to predict my course of action, you can predict it by what story would be the best out of everything. So I'm going to do the kind of thing that's going to give me the best story about it. And I kind of thought that might be a good way to describe my life. I'm going for the good stories.
That's excellent. You know Peyton Quinn or knew of Peyton?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I remember one of the first times I met Peyton back in the '90s, him and Mike Haynack, who used to work
Uh-huh.
with him.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there drinking beer and stuff at Mark McYoung's house one night, and Mike is just as funny as can be. He has everybody rolling. But Peyton said something about, yeah, we were stupid that day, and Mike's like, but if we weren't stupid, we wouldn't have the stories.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Jay has a question. What's your opinion on the translation apps on phones? Have you used
Interesting.
those and have an opinion
Uh,
on those?
The only one that I use regularly is Google Translate. It's not that I think it's the best, but it's the only one I've tried, and I found it adequate. So I find it, I use it pretty much everywhere when I can't speak the language. The other thing that a lot of people don't really know about Google Translate that is invaluable is it has a reading function. So, like street signs, menus, something
Mhm.
like that, you can turn, if you go open up Google Translate and then hit the camera button and shine your camera on whatever you're trying to read, it will translate the words into English real time. And that's just been amazing. It's been a game changer. Eating, it used to be, before that, you had no idea when you would go into a foreign restaurant if you didn't speak the language, and you kind of tended to look around and pick something that someone else is eating that you really liked and just kind of point and say, I want that, and not really know what you're getting. But using Google Translate to translate the menus is really, really useful. There might be other good ones out there, but I just haven't used any other than Google Translate.
Cool. And Jay said super cool on that. So yeah, I didn't know about that about pointing the camera
Yes.
part. So
It's really a game changer. Reading documents, reading street signs, even just signs, trying to figure out what kind of store it is, or an address or a street sign. All you got to do is point your camera at it, and it automatically translates into English. It's not perfect, and some of the translations are a little bit funny, but you can definitely get. It's probably 70% accurate in my experience, depending on the language. So you can get a real good idea what the words are saying, and I use that even far more than I use the vocal translations.
oh, yeah, because I noticed in your book you have some photos of some of the crazy signs that you've seen
Yeah.
that sometimes they get translated to English that make
Yes.
no sense. And
Yes.
I've seen those throughout Asia too. I like the one you had with the male bathroom with the female workers or something. Because
Yes. Yes.
the first time I was in Korea in the 80s, it's like there's women in the bathroom cleaning.
Right. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and one of the bars that we went to, the urinals, I'm like, if at the urinal right now,
Mm.
there's a door right next to me,
Oh.
which is the woman's bathroom. So the
Oh,
women
wow.
had to come
Have to walk past you.
through past you into the woman's bathroom. So it wasn't just the old ladies that were in their cleaning bathrooms, it was the young gals that worked in the bar that are walking past you too.
Wow. That those kind of experiences are just unique, and you can't get them here. I remember Thailand, in Bangkok, in one of the bars, they had a chiropractor in the male restroom, and while you were using the urinal, he would give your neck an adjustment while you were peeing at the urinal, and he just worked for tips, and it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I'm glad I saw him doing work before I walked up, because he just kind of walked up behind people and grabbed their head and did the adjustment. And I
Right.
saw him doing it to other people beforehand, and locals seemed to be okay with it. So, if I was the only one in the bathroom and hadn't seen him working beforehand, somebody grabbed me from behind while I'm standing at a urinal, it might have gotten violent. But no, he
Exactly.
just cracking people's necks while they were peeing at the urinal. It's just stuff you don't see in the United States.
You mentioned Thailand, that reminds me of all of the jewelry scams,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and some of that.
yes.
What are, for some information for some of the viewers and listeners, what are some of the more common scams and ways that people are getting ripped off that they could avoid that you've seen?
Man, that gem or jewelry scam is the classic, and you see that in all kinds of Asian countries, and even in Egypt a little bit. Some of the northern African countries, you see it, and the scam is the taxi driver will take you to a store where he claims either his relatives work, or he's got a deal where you get an exceptional discount, and he's getting paid a commission to drop people off there to buy. And it's really a big hassle. You get the high pressure sales techniques and they don't want to let you go. And he's your ride, and he doesn't want to take you anywhere until you buy something. And it's one of the most common scams out there. Beyond that, I think one of the to make things more generic, every country's got a slightly different take on this, but to make things more generic, I think anytime a local is trying to give you something, that's almost always a scam. It could be a flower, it could be a little friendship bracelet, it could be a piece of paper with some writing on it. All of those things are given to you with the expectation that you will then pay the person for these items, and they present these things as free gifts, and then they hassle you to pay them. And I see this scam over and over and over again. Anytime someone you don't know is trying to give you something, it's going to be a scam, and I think you should probably do your best to avoid that kind of stuff. I'm actually the next book that I'm going to publish is a travel scam guide. I'm working on it now. I've got it mostly completed. Uh, the the chapter in my third world travel book that got the most reader feedback was my chapter on travel scams. So I decided to expand that and make that its own book. So I think that's going to be real useful when I get it out sometime in the future.
And that tip you just gave is a good one, even here in the United States. The guys in Vegas or New York, I've seen them
Yeah.
put, where they want to give you the CDs and
Yes,
different
give you the
stuff.
CDs or giving you the cards with the dirty pictures on them in Vegas. Yeah, the
Yeah,
same kind of deal. They're looking for something. I had the
yeah.
CD one. That's a really common one in the Caribbean islands. I had that one several times over a period of a few years. Um, that's still more common down there. You get people actually listening to CDs rather than streaming services, and you get that quite a bit. I'll give you a CD, but there's an unspoken expectation that you're going to pay for it some way.
Mhm.
And every once in a while, you might actually get a good CD. I remember I forget where I was. Some Caribbean island. We met a guy on the beach, and he sang for us, and we ended up buying a CD for like $10, and it turned out to be pretty good. Every
Yeah.
once in a while, it's not a scam, but in general, yeah, that's a bad news. That you don't want to be doing that.
Yeah. Jay mentioned he's going to be looking for the new book. So when it
Awesome.
comes out, you know, I'm going to share something. When one of my adventures, I showed up at Narita Airport in Japan, coming from Korea, because I had to go there and redo my visa so I could go back to Korea. And I had a pocket full of Korean money, no American money, nothing else. And they did not want to take it in Japan.
No,
So
no,
I learned to change money before you go and not think, oh, I'll
smart,
just do it when I get there. And it was
smart.
definitely one of those moments.
Yes, yes.
What's one of those moments you've had, and what'd you do to get out of it?
Oh, before we go that, I would just tell everybody worries about money changing. The easiest thing in the world to do, every place in the world has ATM machines, and you can just take out local currency with your ATM card. So that's it. You get the best exchange rate. It's less dangerous than dealing with a lot of the border money changers, kind of shifty folks that are doing that kind of stuff. Just whenever you land in the country, hit the airport or hit the airport ATM before you even leave the airport. Pull out your local currency, and you'll be good to go. Do a little research, because a lot of countries, uh, they're more of a cash-based economy than what you see here in the United States or Western Europe, and some of them you really want to have cash. Other countries, they do almost exclusively by credit card, and having cash is kind of a hassle. So yeah, I think as far as the crazy thing, something like that, I ended up getting stopped in Tanzania by a corrupt cop. He created a roadblock. I was traveling to climb Kilimanjaro, and the taxi driver had to stop at this roadblock, and the cop jumped out of the bushes with an AK-47 and actually hit me in the face with the barrel of the gun. Told me that neither I or my driver had the right permits to be on the road at night. No permits were necessary, and we had to pay the fine or be arrested. And
Mm.
so I asked him what the fine was, and I remember to this day, at the time it was 300 Tanzanian shillings, which was the equivalent of 25 US cents. It was a quarter for each of us was the fine. And this dude hit me in the face with the barrel of an AK-47 to extort a quarter from me before he let us pass. That
Wow.
really, that was, kind of first time I got, jacked, and it was by the police. Wasn't really what this former police officer was expecting.
Wow. Yeah. And your advice about the ATM was so right on. And I had a credit card in my pocket that time I landed in Japan, but I had never used it in an ATM because I really don't do ATMs much. And so I didn't know the PIN number.
Yes, yes.
And
It,
so,
it gets kind of weird. There's a couple things going on with that. Some banks have a PIN number that is different than four numbers, and on international ATM, it has to be a four-number PIN. So if you are traveling and you've got a PIN on your ATM card that is different than that, you want to get that changed before you travel. The other is there's a lot of countries right now that aren't taking old school ATM cards. For a while I carried just an ATM card. It didn't have a credit card function on it, didn't have a debit card function. It was just to take money out of an ATM. And I did that because I put a daily limit on the amount of money that could be taken out of it. And so if it got stolen, I'd only lose a maximum amount of money. It wouldn't be like they could charge thousands of dollars against my checking account. But there's a lot of countries now that those cards won't work in the ATMs anymore. They has to have a debit card kind of capacity to function. I was just down in Mexico for 5 weeks over the winter and brought my regular ATM card down there, and it didn't work in any of the ATMs in any of the
mm,
banks anywhere. And I've seen that happen in a couple other countries in South Africa, Dominican Republic, several other countries where the traditional ATM cards don't work. So my recommendation is get an ATM card that actually has a debit card function with it, and make sure it has four numbers for the PIN.
well, yeah. When I was there in Japan, what I ended up doing is going to the outboard to Korea flights
Mhm.
and started
Talk
Japanese
to people.
businessmen going to
Yeah,
Korea. I'll give you
yeah.
a good exchange rate.
Nice. That's a smart thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got enough cash to get me downtown Tokyo, and then
Hmm.
I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to hang out till tomorrow because it was a Sunday when the
Yeah.
banks open. Then I can get money with my credit card and go to the embassy, which I needed to do for the visa.
Hmm.
And I'm hanging out at the Shinjuku bookstore, which I had remembered when I lived in Japan like a year previously, and all of a sudden ran into a friend who happened to be in Tokyo that day,
Oh, wow.
and he like, oh, here, Alan, whipped me off some cash and squared me away, and I paid him, but got him paid back later.
Sure.
But yeah, that was definitely a learning trip.
No doubt. No doubt.
So, one of the things, Greg, when you are getting ready to travel, what do you do to prepare? I mean, there's probably some websites and some research you do, and some certain things that you take with you. So, what do you do to prepare that would help people preparing to go someplace?
What I generally do is I start out by checking the country reputations on the various governmental websites, generally not the U.S. State Department site. I find the U.S. travel advice for various countries tends to be overly restrictive and a bit paranoid. And looking at sites from Canada, Australia, even UK, the advice is much more sound. So I generally check out the concerns of the countries via one of those sites before I go. And then if I've already got my accommodations planned, I tend to check out the area where the hotels where I'm staying is on Google Maps, take a look for it, get a feel for the neighborhood, and then I go from there. But as far as beforehand, if it's a really, really, really strange country that I haven't ever been to before, I'll probably buy a guidebook as well just to get some basic information on the country. But it gets to the point now that I've been to so many that I kind of got the feel for most of them. Even if I haven't been to that particular country, I've been to that part of the world before and kind of know what to expect. And there aren't any real big surprises. But I would suggest a good guidebook. I find actually the Lonely Planet guidebook's the most popular, but it tends to be more out of date information than some of the others. Tend to like some of the other guidebooks outside of the Lonely Planet. And then I look for the websites for the various state departments of UK, Australia, or Canada, and that's where I start.
And then what kind of stuff do you take with you? Do you
It
have any
depends on yeah, it depends on where I'm going. If occasionally I'll go to South America and stay, with a family living in the Amazon jungle with a tribe, and then sometimes I'll go to Europe and stay in a five-star hotel. What I need for those two things are very, very different. So I don't think that there's anything consistently that I take all the time on every trip, other than just some basic survival gear that I find useful in almost every country. I generally take some kind of a Leatherman tool, a multi tool of some sort. Paracord and duct tape is pretty invaluable. I generally travel with some kind of a door stop so I can put some additional security on whatever hotel room or hostel room door that I'm staying in. And then, other than that, probably a flat rubber sink stopper. A lot of third world countries that I go to have no way to collect water in the sink for shaving or for washing dishes or anything like that. So I found those things really kind of invaluable. Is the paracord, the duct tape, the door stop, the sink stopper, and a multi tool, and that kind of lives in my travel suitcase. All that gear, and then I adjust based on where I'm going, all the additional stuff that I have from there.
I know I a lot of times talk to people about door stops, you know, and I talk about them in my active shooter classes, and I say, but when you're traveling, here's another, have it with
Yeah,
you.
it's really, really useful stuff.
Yep.
The one that I found that works the best, it's a little bit more expensive than the standard plastic ones, but there's one that you can get on Amazon for around 10 or 12 bucks. It's called the Wedge It. WEDGE it. And I find that you can really jam that thing under a door real well, and it holds a little bit better than some of the flimsy plastic ones.
Nice. Dixon would like you to tell a little bit about the mask on the wall behind you.
Yeah, my whole house is this. Every time I travel, one thing that I find in every country, carved wooden masks. You can find them almost everywhere. And so those are my souvenirs from every country that I travel. I buy a mask. I can get it home without it breaking. It's usually pretty small and I can throw it in my bags. It's not doesn't take a lot of effort to get back home, and I can find them in almost every country I go to. So my habit is whenever I go to a new country, I buy a local mask and I hang it up on the wall. My living room, a hallway, bedroom is nothing but masked like that, like you see behind me.
Nice. I know that especially when I was younger, before I had a family, I would go to specifically the places where I tell people don't go.
Yeah,
It's like Bangkok, I
yeah,
want to go to the worst bars, the ones I saw in the movies,
yes.
and I
Again,
know that you go to
you get
places
the
like,
stories that way.
yeah.
That's where you get the stories. It's either an amazing adventure or you die, but either way, you come up with a good story.
But I'm not a little guy, and I've had a lot of training. You're definitely not a little guy. You look like you could move tanks out of the way if you had to. What about folks that maybe don't have the physicality? Maybe a small woman or a smaller guy, they don't have the physicalities, but they still want to go to some of those kind of places. What would you advise people on some of that?
I would say, and I tend to do this anyway, even though, I've had a lot of training and I'm a big guy. I don't want to do something stupid. And I think the best thing that a person can do is kind of take the cue from the locals. Ask people at your hotel, ask a taxi driver, is this place safe? Is there any place I should avoid here? And the locals don't want to see a tourist get hurt and have their country have a bad reputation. And I generally get really, really good advice from hotel clerks and taxi drivers as to what parts and what particular businesses and bars are good to go to, and what not necessarily the best kind of places. And then when I get to a particular area, I tend to look around, and something that I look for is the presence of single local women. If the local women are exercising in an area, walking, jogging, or out with their kids in an area, that's generally an area that's pretty safe by all standards. It's the areas that you see that there's only groups of young men and no women around, no families around. Those tend to be the more dangerous spots. And if a local woman or family is in an establishment or on a certain street, you can pretty much bet that it's probably going to be safe for almost everyone. So really pay attention to what the locals are doing. You may not know the background of that particular area, but they do, and they've got a good sense of the safety of it. And you see those women and children, families in any particular area, that's probably a pretty safe place to go.
That's great. I often tell people, talk to your taxi drivers, hotel
Yes.
people. They can give you great places to eat that you'd
Yes.
normally miss. They can tell you the safety kind of things. So
Yes.
use those resources.
Absolutely. Uber drivers now even better, I find sometimes, as far as restaurant recommendations, I find a lot of times the taxi drivers don't necessarily know the best restaurant recommendations. They don't
Mm.
make a lot of money, and they don't spend a lot of money going out to eat at fancy restaurants as a local. So I tend to use them more for the safety kind of stuff. But I've noticed recently, with Uber spreading everywhere, getting a more broader selection of locals. You get lots of professional locals that are doing Uber as a side gig, and I get better local recommendations from the Uber drivers rather than the traditional taxi drivers. But yes, very very important stuff. Talk to the local people, and they'll tell you the good places to go and the places to avoid.
Right. You have a chapter in the book specifically for women. Do you
Yes.
have a tip or two that you like to share with female audience, that specifically for them when they're traveling?
Um, I mentioned, taking the cue of the locals. Look for what other local women are doing and trying to model that behavior. Uh, I think, as far as the women stuff go, the things that are most shocking to my female traveling companions are either dress restrictions or the way that women may be treated in by especially men in the developing world. Lots of places, what women normally would wear summertime in the United States isn't appropriate in those local locations, especially if you're visiting any kind of site with religious or historical significance. They're going to want, covered legs, and sometimes even, covered hair and all of that. So paying attention to local clothing restrictions is probably something that more women have to pay attention to than men. I would generally tell a lot of women, and most women travelers do this, but to carry some type of a shawl or large scarf that they could use to wrap around themselves if they have some uncovered skin in some areas that wouldn't allow that. So that kind of thing. And then the other thing is, a lot of women are very surprised in the developing world at the amount of catcalls, groping, just general unacceptable behavior that the local men commonly exhibit. It's a different culture, and things that wouldn't be acceptable here in the United States or Europe or Australia tend to go unchecked in those environments. And so positioning yourself to avoid those kind of situations is kind of critical, especially the more primitive the country is.
No, yeah, that's great advice, 'cause, I've seen some of that same thing, and it's we get so accustomed to here in America where even though maybe women don't have total equality yet, it is so different when you go to some other places. It's like, wow.
Yes. Not unusual to see a husband smacking his wife in public in South America or Africa. It's and no one bats an eye at it. Just stuff you wouldn't normally see outside of the worst Walmart in America. You just wouldn't see that kind of behavior, and it's pretty commonplace. So I caution a lot of women, especially with the more developing countries, don't go into it with your attitude and expectations that you can say whatever you want to whoever you want without any physical consequences, because that isn't always the case in some countries.
Right. Greg, the theme of my website and a lot of my teaching is to enjoy life, but to do it safely.
Yeah.
What is something that you have just really enjoyed regarding some of your travel?
And I look back, I think one thing that was surprising to me how much I enjoyed it was the Galapagos Islands. I was dating a woman who was very into animals at the time. She wanted to go. I thought, well, this might be fun, but I was not overly excited about it. Once I got there, it was stunning, just absolutely amazing. Snorkeling, diving, swimming with all of these creatures that have absolutely no fear of humans because there's no predation on the island. So, snorkeling with sea lions who come up to you and, bump their face on your mask. Uh, Big turtles, massive fish, just just one of the most memorable things I think I've ever done, and I would highly encourage if anyone gets a chance to go to the Galapagos, which is islands off the west coast of Ecuador. Uh, if you are a nature person, that's really a stunning location to visit. And I have very, very fond memories of that place. As far as other just crazy landscapes, Antarctica is definitely something to see. It's quite difficult to travel there, but those two places probably are the most memorable of any of the places that I've traveled, and both of them just stunning scenic nature scenes, and the environment was just stellar and so different than anything that you can see around here.
Well, no, they do sound beautiful places. And right before you started with that, Jay said great points regarding the
Oh,
stuff you were talking about with
thank
the
you.
the female travelers and stuff. And Jay is watching with his wife Vicky here as well. So
Awesome,
both
thank
said
you.
good morning. Before we close, what is one final sort of safety, enjoy life type of tip that you'd like to share that maybe we haven't talked about yet?
As far as the enjoy life thing, I imagine a lot of your readers and watchers and listeners are probably very safety oriented based on the material that you've written in your books. And I find a lot of those are the folks that I teach. I'm a full time firearms instructor now that I retired from the police department. I travel all over the country teaching gun classes. And the people that I teach, and I think a lot of the people that are in your audience, are very cognizant of safety issues and tend to be overly restrictive in the types of things that they do because it might not be safe. And a concept I've been thinking of recently, just being asked by so many people, why do you go to these crazy places where you can't carry a gun and you can't have your weapons? And the reward is greater than the risk. And the one piece of advice that I would give you to consider is yes, going to a lot of the places where I go, it's a little riskier than living life in my suburban United States existence here, but the rewards outweigh those risks. And I think a lot of people, especially in our environment, don't consider the rewards. They just look at the risks, and they're missing out on things that could be life experiences that would truly enrich a person's life. And they're missing out because it's slightly more dangerous than going to the grocery store at home. So when you're kind of trying to weigh those decisions, don't don't let enjoyment be a factor you don't consider. You might have a whole lot of fun in a slightly more risky situation. I'm all about doing risky things as safely as possible. And I think that if people truly analyzed what they're thinking about doing, eh, the the benefits of the enjoyment might far outweigh a slight increase in risk. And so the one piece of advice I would give people is when you're calculating, making your decision, should I go to this place or should I not? Consider the benefits as well as the risks, and that might change your calculation a bit.
That is awesome. And it reminds me of a time, years ago, my daughter was younger and we went to the Mall of America for a holiday weekend, a long weekend. And there was, I think it was one of the Mission Impossible movies was debuting that weekend. And so we went to the Mall of America theater and saw Mission Impossible.
Sure.
And I had a person comment to me, what are you doing going to the opening of the big movie? Are you wanting a shooting incident like you write about in your book so you could be a hero or something? And I'm like, we like movies.
Yes,
And
yes,
and just because there was that one terrible shooting
yes.
at the premiere of the Batman movie isn't going to keep me from enjoying movies the rest of my
No.
life with my family.
No, and that's what I'm talking about. It's a balanced assessment. Yeah, you're probably in a movie theater. You're maybe slightly more risk than other activities you do, but seeing a great movie is a wonderful experience, and it's worth that one in a million chance that yeah, maybe this might be the one that the active killer hits. So that's why you plan your countermeasures. You sit in a place where you can get out easily, and you plan your exits, and you plan how you're going to engage this person if you're armed, and how you're going to protect your family, and then you go on and you live your life and enjoy things. It's not a you know life isn't meant to be lived sitting in your living room ensconced behind locked doors with a AR-15 in your hands waiting for a threat. You've got to enjoy your life too, and that's what a lot of people miss with this kind of stuff. Going to see a premiere movie and the energy of that in a big theater, that's fun. And yeah, it's probably slightly more risky than sitting at home on your couch. But I think in my mind, having that kind of experience is worth the slight increase in risk over staying home. And that's what a lot of people are really missing.
And that's exactly what I try to teach and try to get out to people. So, we're right on the same page with some of that. And what you said, you sort of know your exits and stuff. And that only take if you have thought about it and prepared, that only takes a second. You're like
It- yeah, a
bing
few
exit.
seconds, mitigate your issues, any
Yep,
potential threats, mitigate those, and then go on with your life.
exactly. And so, I want to bring up this page here. Everybody, that if you are interested in Greg's book, which is an excellent book, go to chooseadventurebook.com and you'll see this page right here. And there's some more information and link to some blog articles and different things you can get there, as well as you can order this in Kindle edition or whatever, paper edition, like, we got here. I like paper editions, but I got a huge Kindle library as well. So that's a good place to go. And then I also do want to share this website, activeresponsetraining.net, and make sure you got that net. That's Greg's blog with just a wealth of information. And I just mentioned Kindle books. One of the reasons I have thousands literally of Kindle books, a lot of them not read, is because a couple times a month on Thursdays, Greg posts a big list of very interesting books that you can get on free on Kindle
Yes.
if you get there quick. Every once in a while there's a book that that looks good, and it's not free anymore.
Yeah.
And that happens. But there's tons of articles, both that Greg shares and that he writes. So those two websites, great places to go.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've been doing that one a long time. I just finished this is my 12th year doing it, at least 3 to 4 articles a week for 12 years without stopping. So there's almost 3,000 articles there on that website. Lots of good stuff for you to find. So
There's
thank
a
you for
ton.
recommending it.
I mean, I went to that website when I was researching and writing Survive a Shooting. I mean, and you're listed. Some of your articles are in the resources page and you're quoted, just some excellent stuff on, active killers and active threats. If you're law enforcement, a lot of great articles on law enforcement, training and tactics and things that you should be doing as a law enforcement officer. But there's a lot of good stuff for civilians and folks as well on staying safe, awareness, active killers, different things. So those are definitely places that you want to go to get some information. And they're scrolling across the bottom there again, too.
Thank you.
And I think we just had another comment. Dixon says, measure the risk, but choose adventure.
I like it. I like it. I'm going to steal that, Dixon. Thank you.
Well, thank you much, Greg. It has been wonderful having you on. And any last comments you want for that before we sign off?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks, Alan.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching. Remember, share this around to people that might get some use out of it. If they're going to be going to travel, let them see this video, or share the podcast from enjoylifesafely.com. The podcast audio will be up there later today. I appreciate everybody that watches, listens, comments, whether it's live, on the replay, on the podcast. You're all appreciated. Go out, make it a fantastic Friday, and I'll see you tomorrow.